Welcome back on the AM show. Like I said this morning, we have a conversation for part of our big stories today. We have a conversation with a member of parliament for Tamale North, Alhassan Suhuyini. He joins us to discuss various issues of national interest, and he's here with me in the studio, Alhassan Saibu Suhuyini. Did I get your name correct?
I feel like clapping for you.
Oh, please, I'm not stopping you. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you very much.
This is your first time joining us here in the studio.
In your new, improved, modernized studio.
How do you
Congratulations.
like it?
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and thank you for having me this morning.
Well, it's a pleasure.
Right.
Let me start by asking, how are the people of Tamale North doing?
Alhamdulillah, we are well, except that we all know the situation that the country is currently in. Economic difficulties, lack of water, especially around this season in the north, and lack of power, and sometimes very poor internet service. And so people are doing well by the grace of God, but we cannot overlook the challenges that we are all facing. I haven't been to the constituency for some number of weeks now. Okay. I intend to go by this weekend, God willing. But generally speaking, even though things are difficult, we are doing our very best to continue to serve because we have a mandate of the people to provide hope and also to resolve some of the challenges that are within our control and that are also solvable with the mandate that we have as members of parliament for the Tamale North constituency. So when I go this weekend, I will be, as usual, engaging with the people, interacting with them, finding out what the issues are and those that can be resolved. We also intend, hopefully, before I return to commission, Chips compound, okay. The fourth that we have been able to lead to construct in partnership with Qatar Charity for the people of the Chogu electoral area. Okay. Yes.
Congratulations in advance.
Thank you.
You mentioned power. What's your appreciation of this ongoing power issue? I mean, just yesterday or 2 days ago, I saw again that Electricity Committee of Ghana had issued a statement that GridCo had reduced power supply, and so some areas were not going to have power. But we all know, or at least I think I know, that the issue is not about GridCo reducing power because they want to. It's because we don't have money to buy fuel. It's because of the lack of transparency, some infrastructural challenges, transmission losses, the myriad of issues affecting our power sector. What's your appreciation of this?
Sweetie, I look at what is happening now in the power sector, and I think that it is time I bring back a picture that I have repeatedly painted for people to appreciate how terribly our country has been managed since 2017. But, a story is better appreciated when it is told within a certain context and at a certain time. I have said repeatedly that if you look at this government, they had no business being one of the worst that we have experienced in the Fourth Republic. Why? Because they came into power with a lot of goodwill. If for nothing at all, they themselves brag about how they won the 2016 elections with over 1 million votes. So the goodwill was not lacking. And so the people of Ghana were willing to support them to succeed. That aside, they inherited a number of infrastructural and economic, transformations that had taken off. For example, in the power sector, you will recall that under President Rawlings, we had Dumso. Under President Akufo, we had Dumso. And that is why, even in managing it, he brought in machines. I'm getting there. Okay. I'm picking it from that side, from President Akufo, Rawlings to Akufo. When he tried to manage it, I'm referring to President Akufo, okay. He brought in machines that his VRA boss at the time, Charles Wokubu, described as toy machines. Then came President Mills, who also experienced them. So I recall the joke he told about how his niece was in the salon and the power went off and they said at Mills and the niece complained. So all these presidents experienced this Dumsor challenge. Now why? At the time, the experts told us that we were not investing the way we should in power generation. And so generation was not, meeting the growth in demand.
Okay.
That was the verdict. So if you were not investing in generation capacity and fixing other challenges, and you were just managing it with toy machines and other palliative actions, obviously what was going to happen? It was going to get worse someday. And so when President Mahama took over, that was when it got worse. Being the leader and the visionary person that he was, he didn't blame his predecessors for not taking action when they should have. In fact, some people went to the Akosombo Dam under President Akufo to pray for water to fill the dam so we'll get power. Those were the solutions that people were proffering before President Mahama. But when he took over, he decided that this needed to be resolved. And he accepted responsibility, stood before Parliament, where the people representatives are, and made a pledge to fix it. And sweetie, by the time he left office, he had fixed it. He fixed it in 3 ways. 3 ways. And I'll come back to the story that I've been telling. The challenge at the time, or the challenges at the time, were generation, capacity, fuel shortage, and financial constraints. Financial constraints because over the years, we were not investing and we were riddled, the sector was riddled with debts. And so banks were not even willing to lend money to investors in that industry. How did he solve it? He fast-tracked the Ghana Gas Infrastructure Project to make fuel available. He went ahead in 2016 when he was leaving office to sign the ENI agreement to make fuel available. And that is why reporters, after 2016, did not have to deal with West Africa gas pipeline breakages. And, when I was a reporter in those days, every time WACP had a problem, WACP was West Africa gas pipeline. Yeah. Ghana faced Dumsor. But by the time President Mahama left, he made sure that ENI was available, Ghana gas was available, solving that fuel problem.
Okay, let's proceed.
Then he solved the financial problem by introducing ELSLA. Even at a time that it was going to affect his re-election chances, because it was an election year and times were hard and people didn't want to pay more taxes. But he said, this is the way to solve this problem. We needed to introduce ELSLA. The opposition then took advantage, hit the streets, made him more unpopular about it. But guess what? When they came into power, they mismanaged ELSLA. Because by the time he was leaving office, he didn't even enjoy the proceeds of ELSLA. Because he implemented it and lost. Then the accumulation started under their regime. And what did they do? They took the money that was coming in and collateralized it by taking the future money that was supposed to come to ELSLA and used it, in other unproductive areas. And today, because of what they have done to ELSLA, they cannot pay the independent power producers because that money was supposed to be ring-fenced to be used to pay legacy debts and also pay the independent power producers. They have chopped that money, and I'm using the Ghanaian phrase. They have chopped that money and even chopped future money. And so it's no longer available, even though you and I are still paying ELSLA. Okay. So that's how he solved the financial problem. The generation problem, the verdict is out there. He brought in car power, brought in Ameri, brought in all those things for which he was crucified.
Let's stay on Ameri because it's part of...
But you see, if I don't finish this thought train...
Please.
Yes. So he solved it for them. And so they had no business taking us back. But I see this situation, this power situation, like the way I see even the economic crisis that we find ourselves in. I say that this was a government that inherited so much. And so by 2017, I've always likened them to a child that inherits a lot of wealth after their parents pass and the will is read. And so there are mansions here, there are money in the bank accounts, and so they take over. And then they start acting rich and showing off. So 2017, by 2016, because of President Mahama and the NDC's work, the EIU and others had predicted that Ghana's economy was going to grow by about 8 to 9%. So when the NPP took over in 2017 and posted about 8 to 9% GDP growth, everybody thought it was their work. But they were just inheriting what had been done. But if you look at the trend, by 2018, they had finished chopping the inheritance. They had finished chopping the inheritance. Okay. And now we were now going to be ushered into their own performance. And it is their own performance that led us into this crisis that we are in, where we have all had to endure haircuts, and our country is unable to pay its debts. Never seen before in the Fourth Republic. Yes. And it is the same with the power situation. So they came into office and were even complaining about too much power. They had inherited so much, infrastructure established for our power situation never to be this bad again. But because they didn't have the vision, they could not think beyond 3 months. They didn't even know what to do with the power. Yet they promised one district, one factory. Can you imagine if they had implemented the one district, one factory? Would they have been complaining about excess power? No. But clearly, they didn't know what to do with it. They saw so much money coming from ESLA. They didn't know what to do with it. So they thought that the best way to invest that money is to collateralize it and get more and just hold quinky parties and all that. And this is where we are.
This is the situation, thank you for that breakdown. This is the situation we find ourselves in now. And the minority has raised concerns about the use of 38 million for the movement of a Ameri power plant. What's the exactitude of your issue with this? Because I understand that in as much as it doesn't solve our problems, it will help at least to cut transmission losses if you have a power plant like that in the central areas of the country. So what's the issue that the minority has with the movement of the Ameri power plant, 6 units of the Ameri power plant to Kumasi?
First of all, is the cost.
Okay.
Secondly, is the hypocrisy. Now you have a party that in opposition claimed that this whole Ameri deal was fraudulent. They came into power and set about investigating this deal. Came to Parliament with the intention of reviewing the deal. And I'm sure you remember what happened. Whereas the people they criticized, that's the NDC and President Mahama, got this plant for about $510 million.
$510
million. That was supposed to be for Ghana after 5 years. They came into power. After their investigations, they brought a new deal that they claimed they had renegotiated. And the cost was now going to be about 1 billion.
Okay.
And from 510 to 1 billion. And the duration it was now going to take for Ghana to own the plant was moved from 5 years to 15 years. You remember that was the issue the minority raised, which led to the president admitting that he was ill-advised.
Yeah.
And sacked his energy minister, Boache Ejako.
Okay.
Now, what does it tell you? That if they were the original negotiators of this deal and not President Mahama, we would have had a very, very terrible deal, even though they criticized President Mahama's deal. Because when they had the opportunity to negotiate, what they brought us was $1 billion plus and 15 years. And due to civil society pressure, they abandoned that. But still, what they came up later with the new minister, Honorable Peter Amewu, was not better than what the NDC brought. They also, since they took over, have never held anybody responsible for any fraudulent transaction. Never. No one has been prosecuted. No one is even undergoing any prosecution. So was it just lies? Was it just propaganda? 7 years, no one. And they fail to admit to their propaganda and continue to rather even regurgitate that in the media, shamelessly. For example, when they attempt to change the name and people ask why, they say it represents fraud, without proving the fraud, without holding anybody responsible for the fraud. And so I've asked that question. If you are asking the people of Ashanti to celebrate you and pat you on the back for bringing them, a plant, for bringing them a Kumasi terminal plant, are you suggesting to them that someone engaged in fraud and you have gone to bring them a fraudulent thing without holding the person who was engaged in that fraud responsible? It's just like a basic example. I mean, it may not, but it suffices. I am walking up here, I come up here and then I hand you a phone and then you say, where did I get this? I say, oh, I think you need this. But someone stole it out there and I collected it for you.
Okay.
I mean, what would be your reaction? So I'm saying that the people of Ashanti, yes, even if they deserve this, and the country also deserves this because it will lead to checking the transmission or reducing the transmission losses, the NPP should not be taking any glory in this, especially when they have not explained their previous stance as far as the visionary decision to procure this plant is concerned.
So the conclusion is
and
that
then again,
you come to power, you
and then,
investigate and...
Yes, and then again you find out that this whole movement of the plant from the western region to Kumasi cost us $35 million.
I thought it was $38 million.
$38 million, yes. $38 million, thank you. And the question I'm asking myself, and I think that we should all be asking ourselves is, how much did it cost us to move it from, well, they say Dubai, or wherever it came from, to Ghana?
Okay.
I mean, I'm telling you that the whole transaction cost us $510 million, which they claim was fraudulent. And just moving it from Ghana or Western region within Ghana to Kumasi, you are paying $38 million. I mean, how, if you describe the whole transaction that brought us this plant as fraudulent, I don't know the adjective to use to describe you who moved it from Western region to Ashanti region at a cost of $35 million. $38 million. I keep referring to 34 million. Yeah, I think it's around $35 million.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm saying that clearly these people cannot be trusted. And I think that we have demonstrated a lot of patience and tolerance as a people, which sometimes I am marveled at. But I think that it is important that when we have the opportunity, we send a message, not just to the NPP, but to all politicians, that we will not tolerate that level of mismanagement, arrogance and intransigence, and even dishonesty in public office. So because if we do not punish them in a way that will deter other politicians, people may begin to think that is the norm, and that's the standard.
We know the problem.
Yeah.
We understand that it's money, mismanagement, all the things you've said.
Yeah.
What do you see as a way forward out of? Do you see Ghana getting out of this power crisis anytime soon? And how do we move forward from here?
Clearly, what we need now is honesty on the part of those in charge.
Okay.
I have said that, I mean, sometimes their incompetence, their mismanagement, their corruption is not even as offensive as their dishonesty. It is important that they come to the people of Ghana with some level of honesty, because then it shows that they respect our intelligence. And the way to go about it is to tell us exactly the truth about the situation. And tell us how they are taking us out. That's what President Mahama did. That, look, we have a financial problem, we have a generation problem, and we have a fuel problem. And these are the ways I'm going to solve it. That's what he did. The President, His Excellency, Nana Akufo-Addo, the Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, the driver's mate, and the energy minister must be leading a conversation to let us truly appreciate where we are. We know where we are, but we just want that respect shown to us. The PURC recently, I mean, in their engagement with the ECG, shared with us after they assessed the data that the ECG itself presented to them. ECG presented the data to them. And after assessing the data, they came to the conclusion that out of about 4,000 outages within the period, only about 600 could be attributed to what do you call it? Localized, problems. Only about 600.
Okay.
And they concluded that the rest of the outages were due to shortage in generation capacity. I mean, in generation.
Right.
And that is a government regulatory agency assessing data provided by ECG itself and concluding in that way. And so it is intransigent. It is inexplainable that people in authority, like the minister and his spokespersons, will continue to deny this obvious fact. It is insulting to us as a people.
The opportunity to get answers from the minister. Before Parliament went on recess, you were trying to get the minister to, face Parliament and give you answers on some of these issues. Do you think you've missed that window? Because as it stands now, even Greatco has written to the minister. The minister himself has had calls for a timetable. You know the responses that he has given us. You think
he says we should develop our own timetable?
Yeah, so
the arrogance.
How do we get him back to...
I haven't missed that opportunity, but you see, that's why I'm saying that it is important that they come to the table with some level of honesty, because that shows respect to the people who put them in authority. Okay. Look, before Parliament went on recess, you are right. I raised this issue and requested the Speaker to direct the Minister of Energy to appear before Parliament to brief the nation on the energy situation. The majority leader resisted that call and suggested to me to file an urgent question instead. I knew it was part of the tricks to, absolve the minister from the responsibility of telling us what the true situation is.
Right.
But after back and forth, and I noticed that the speaker agreed with my call, but was also, because of leadership respect, yielding to the proposal by the majority leader, he's kind of, I would say, persuaded me to file the urgent question. I'm telling you, and I did.
Right.
I filed the urgent question, and guess what? From the week I filed the urgent question till the time Parliament went on recess, the minister deliberately avoided coming to Parliament. And so the question was on the order paper all the remaining days until recess, but the minister was never available to field that question. Why? Because it is part of that plan not to tell us the truth, and that for me amounts to disrespecting us, for which we must hold them responsible for. And no wonder that after we go on recess and the media accost him, he tells us that we can all draw our own timetable.
I think you are wishing evil on the country if you want the minister to give you a timetable. These words, not mine. So would you back calls to sack him because of this disrespect you're talking about and his refusal to produce a timetable? If PURC, Greatco, they're saying that the way forward is just so that Ghanaians can manage our daily lives properly, because we know that there is a deficiency in the supply of electricity, the generation of power. It will not meet our demand. Would you back calls to sack the energy minister?
Sack him?
Yeah.
Why don't we just sack the government? I wish we could, even before December. Because this is bigger than just one person. The mess is bigger than just one person. How long has he been energy minister for? And we all know that this also has a financial implication. And we know the dire economic situation that we find ourselves in as a country. And we know what led us there. Mismanagement, poor decisions.
Okay.
Decisions that only NAPO didn't take. Decisions that were taken at the economic management team meetings, shared by Dr. Mahmoudou. And so clearly, sacking one person, in my view, is less of a solution compared to sacking the whole administration.
Okay. Let's stay on Parliament, but let's move away from this power crisis. There's this ongoing tussle between the legislature and executive on this proper human rights and proper Ghanaian values, the anti-LGBTQ bill.
Right.
How do you feel about where we are right now? Do you think the sponsors of this bill are satisfied? The number of cases ongoing back and forth in courts. Do you think Parliament, number one, is doing enough to ensure that the bill reaches the desk of the president? And what are the sponsors doing about this impasse?
For our sponsors, we are very proud of the Ghanaian people. We are very proud of all the stakeholders who came together to give us the support and the encouragement needed for the bill to be passed. And we cannot thank the people of Ghana enough for that level of solidarity and support. It means to us that we took on a cause that resonates well, indeed, with our cultural and social values as a people. Remember, the basis of every law is the morality of the society. So what a society deems important to legislate on depends on their way of life, depends on their culture, every law. And that is why in the conversation, I used to give examples of how in some jurisdictions, bigamy is a law.
Okay.
I mean, if you go to my constituency and you talk of bigamy as a law, people will find it ridiculous. Why can't I have more than one wife? Some people can't wrap their head around such a law. But it is a law in some societies because it is a way of life that society has chosen. And so this anti-LGBTQ, legislation resonates and reflects our way of life as a people. And anybody who has an issue with it has to, first of all, see it from that point of view, that this is a group of people, this is their culture, this is their way of life, and this is how they want to be governed. And I am particularly excited about the level of support that it enjoyed. Parliament did its work.
I thought you'd say majority of the people, because there are some Ghanaians who support who are against the bill because they fall in the category of the people that this bill seeks to lay sanctions against. We are in a democratic rule.
Okay. And so it is not just majority, it is actually an overwhelming majority which represents the whole. That is how presidents are decided. Otherwise, we would have said majority of the people's president.
Right.
But we call them the president because that's democracy.
Point note.
Exactly. So it is the people of Ghana. It is what we want. And we are happy that people supported us to do what Parliament was required to do. Because Parliament is required to take a bill through a number of stages.
Yes.
Parliament has done that.
Yes.
And fortunately for us also, it was largely, if you like, bipartisan. It enjoyed the support of both sides of the House.
Right.
And it went through all the processes. In fact, it is the bill that received the largest number of inputs by way of people sending in memos and all of that.
Okay.
And we are proud of that.
Okay.
Now, the problem is with the attitude of the executive. And that is what we need as a people to begin to assess critically and thoroughly. Our Parliament has demonstrated that indeed it represents our interest. It represents our values. It represents what we want. The Parliament has done that. But when you find the executive pussyfooting the way they are, then it is time for us as a people to question where the executive stands on this. And remember that this whole bill was triggered after the leader of the executive, the president, granted an interview and suggested that the act was not legalized in Ghana because people were not mobilizing to bring about the necessary pressure. And that in his view, if that happened, it was bound to happen and that it was bound to be legalized. That's what triggered this bill. And so we noticed that there was a need for us to shut all the doors and windows so that it doesn't give the opportunity for people to begin to mobilize, to ask for legislation to legalize it. So when you have him, again, after Parliament has finished his job, meet the international community and lie to them about a pending case that was making it unable for him to take a decision on the bill, then you wonder where he actually stands, where he and his government stands. When it takes his running mate, his vice president, Dr. Mahmoudou, many months before he is able to make a religious pronouncement on it, without calling on the driver to take a firm position, then you wonder if this is just politics for them.
Right.
Or they actually mean well and represent our values and our views. So it is the problem that we have with the bill now is with the executive and its attitude. The executive and its attitude. Why? All bills, when they are passed by Parliament, are transmitted to the presidency.
Yes.
The presidency receives it and decides on what to do with it. For example, the e-levy bill.
Right.
It didn't matter that there was a pending issue in the court. It was transmitted. Parliament was not asked to desist and, what was the phrase? Desist.
Yeah, but...
We shouldn't send it. Parliament was not asked. It was signed. The witchcrafts and other legislations were sent to the president. He signed some, he didn't sign some, but he did not send it back to Parliament, warning Parliament never to bring it back.
So my question is,
why on this
the
bill?
Intention to amplify. How do you ensure that this bill that has been passed by Parliament, and there's ongoing so many cases on this bill between the judiciary is now involved, how do you amplify to ensure that this bill gets to the desk of the president?
So the one I'm telling you,
the only way he would sign is if it gets to him.
So what I'm telling you is that it's no longer the responsibility of the sponsors, the sole responsibility of the sponsors.
Okay.
It is no longer the sole responsibility of Parliament. This bill reflects our desires as a people, as far as how we want our society to be, managed is concerned. So the sponsors have played their role. Parliament has played its role. The executive, and it seems, and note my phrase, and it seems, in connivance with the judiciary, is pussyfooting. This is where it becomes the responsibility of every Ghanaian.
Are you saying that because...
Every Ghanaian, including the media, including civil society, and yes, with the sponsors and Parliament also in sync, demanding that the executive and the judiciary do what is right. You cannot have a situation where the judiciary acts expeditiously on some of the cases related to this bill and then turn deaf ear to the other cases related to this bill. You have had the Speaker of Parliament writing even to the judiciary to expedite action on some of the pending cases.
Right.
And then you have the president, like I have said, leading the executive, pussyfooting and taking decisions that should question any average mind about its commitment.
It's out of your hands.
It's
now in the hands of Ghanaians.
It's in the hands of all of us.
Right.
We must demand that the president and his cohorts, especially Dr. Mahmoudou, his anointed successor, and the judiciary, to take this up.
Right.
And do what we expect them to do. We all have to begin to demand that enough of the pussyfooting, enough of the back and forth, enough of the legal gymnastics. We know that all they are doing is just to delay and wash away the importance of this bill. And we want that bill.
For the sake of time, we need to move on. But I just want, before we go to the appointments committee and some of the new ministerial appointments, do you think that the hands of the president are tied?
How so?
When it comes to this bill,
I think.
Would you say that there's some sort of connection there between the IMF, the president, back and forth, like pussyfooting, like you said? Yes or no? Would you say that his hands are tied?
It depends on who the president is serving. If the president is serving the people of Ghana, then this is a very straightforward case that leaves his hands more free than any other matter has ever left his hands. Yeah. But if he's serving another interest, apart from the interest of Ghanaians, then perhaps he has his hands tied.
Great. Let's move on. So despite Parliament not approving these new ministerial nominees, some of them have assumed office in acting capacity. How do you feel about that? Is it legal? Is it problematic? And it's even left some ministries like health and information without a substantive minister. But work is ongoing.
Yes, so it is another example of how this country is run like an empire by this particular president and his government. Their actions sometimes suggest to you that they think they are operating from a palace instead of a democratically elected office. The laws are what they say the laws are. Because clearly, I am still at a loss as to why the courts did not agree with my colleague Roxanne when he made the point so succinctly that the president erred in his belated reshuffle. Because this is a reshuffle that people have been calling for since. But when he was going to do it, he still couldn't even do it well. Because clearly, over the years, operating with the Constitution, when a minister of state is vetted and approved, he or she is available to serve in any ministry. Once the person is vetted and approved.
Right.
You no longer require Parliament's approval to send such a vetted and approved minister to any ministry. But immediately you dismiss such a minister and make an appointment, it becomes a new appointment. It's just like we have had in situations where perhaps in the first year of a government, a minister is fired. And then in the third year, he's appointed to another ministry. The time in law, in this legal discussion, will not matter whether the dismissal was for 30 seconds or the dismissal was for 2 years. A dismissal is a dismissal. Okay. So in issuing the statement, the president clearly erred in saying that the following ministers were dismissed. And then in the next paragraph, you now appoint them to new ministries. That was wrong in law, just like the letter the secretary again wrote to Parliament asking it to desist from bringing it a bill. But it all ties into that empire mentality, that palace rule mentality. So clearly, I believe that my colleague Honorable Roxanne was correct in law when he argued that those ministers who had their names in the dismissed list had to go through vetting again. He was right, in my view. But, well, it's in the bosom of the court. But I say that the president, yes, has some powers to even write to ministers or to people to be caretaker, to play a caretaker role at certain ministries. I haven't seen any letter to that effect. But I have seen, like you have also seen, some of them
are working,
playing the caretaker role. And like I said in the case of the LGBTQ, there's too many things that makes you wonder if the executive is not acting in connivance with the judiciary to just bastardize our laws in this country. And that, for me, is a threat to our democracy. If we allow that kind of mentality by our actions, that kind of perception by our actions and deeds to fester, it threatens our democracy. Then people begin to think that the rule of law has become the rule of the mighty. And once it becomes the rule of the mighty, they will want to test it. And you do know that the people in power are not as powerful as the power of the people.
Is that not why you are there? Is that not why we've elected you as members of parliament, even in minority or in opposition? What are you doing? You've said so many things about how the president is ignoring rule of law, and bastardizing our laws,
including, I mean, I've said a lot of things.
You cannot be blameless.
I'm saying I've said a lot of things.
Yes.
And in the lot of things, what we have been doing as parliamentarians and parliament is part of that. I just told you how we went to court.
Yes.
Our colleague went to court.
Yes. You also mentioned that about the LGBTQ is out of your hands because you've done your bit. But if you say you've done your bit and you're just folding arms and watching.
I didn't say I'm folding arms.
I didn't say you said you're folding arms. Okay?
What I said, and let me repeat that. You see, we all have our roles cut out. There are some roles the general public cannot perform, like they can't sponsor a private member's.
Right.
And so when a matter is important, you will expect your parliamentarians in opposition, in government, to sponsor a bill. We did that. That's our responsibility. You will expect them to shepherd it through all the processes for it to be passed. We did that.
Okay.
You will expect that parliament will play its role by transmitting it to the presidency. They did that.
Okay.
Now, if the executive, which is working on our behalf, which is paid by our taxes, is failing to play their role, at that point, we don't continue to demand that Parliament and the parliamentarians continue to do something about it when we are not joining them to do something. So I'm simply saying that it has become a shared responsibility. And that is why, again, I said in the case of the seeming connivance between the judiciary and the presidency, that Parliament can play a role. Parliament has played a role. We've gone to the courts, we have tested the laws, the courts have ruled in some bizarre circumstances in some ways, but as law-abiding citizens, we will continue to advocate, and that's one other role of parliamentarians. Okay. We'll continue to do the advocacy. But I have concluded by cautioning that if the executive and the judiciary are not careful and they continue in their actions, and those actions continue to fester the perception that they are turning our laws upside down, then they invite a resistance that can threaten our democracy.
Right, I get all that. The question I meant to ask, or what I mean, is that on this approval of new ministerial nominees, what can you do going forward? Because some of them have assumed in acting capacity, but they're working. Yeah. And you're saying that it was wrong that some of them were dismissed by the president, and then now saying that he's reappointing them. Some of them even went through vetting. What is the way forward? That's the question.
So the way forward is that some cases are still pending in relation to this matter. Okay. And they are sponsored by members of parliament. Secondly, Parliament is currently on recess. Right. And on recess, there's very little you can do by way of either voting for them or voting against them or demanding a certain action. We wait for Parliament. Until Parliament comes back from recess, it will be very difficult for us collectively to take a decision on how to deal with the current situation. Okay. I mean, for example, when Parliament comes back on recess, it can even take a decision not to recognize certain ministers because there are committees. There are committees. I'm saying that these are things that are open. But I'm saying that, for me, some of these things become relevant and significant when they enjoy the support of the ordinary people because you do it on behalf of them. But when it is seen as if they check out and they don't appreciate their role in making some of these moves successful, then it becomes like a Jack Toronto kind of person leading something that is not appreciated. Okay. So clearly, when we come back, these are options available. I mean, we can decide as a committee of parliament to say that we won't recognize this minister because we don't think that he has been properly put in office. All right. But these are all options that are
available for the appointments committee.
Yeah, well, to the committees of parliament in general.
Well, okay. Let's talk about Galamsey and the menace. A few weeks ago, the flag bearer of the New Patriotic Party was saying that he will no longer seize or burn the excavators of illegal miners. But we know that Galamsey is still, there's troubles. Our rivers are polluted. Cocoa farmers are even giving up their lands for Galamsey because it's a quick fix to some of the issues they're facing, money, for example. Do you see this problem going away? And how do we make headway? On the back of what the flag bearer or the vice president has been saying, that he's not going to burn excavators. What's your reaction to that?
Well, because you use the vice president, I actually don't have sympathies for the president, Nana Akufo-Addo. But I'm beginning to develop some level of sympathy for him, especially because of the way his vice president is treating him. You know, I have followed Nana Akufo-Addo's politics for a very long time.
Okay.
He did not have a very beautiful relationship with former President Kufuor. And it's an open secret. But not once did he criticize former President Kufuor's policies or programs. Not once did he do that publicly. Not once. That, for me, is a mark of a comrade, one that appreciates relationships, even when those relationships are not in the best of form. He didn't. And so to have someone that he picked in our context, in Ghanaian context, from nowhere, made a running mate and actually got a party card for him.
Oh.
Yeah, he actually got a party card for Dr. Mahmoud.
Bawumia.
I mean, so he turned him from a nobody into a leading member of the New Patriotic Party. Later, a vice president of the Republic of Ghana for 7 good years. Even going against opposition from his own party to stand by him the way he has over the years. To have a man like that still sit in the same office with him and disown him and his policies makes me sympathize with Nana Akufo-Addo, even though I don't have a lot of sympathies for him.
When you say disown him, what do you mean?
He will no longer burn excavators like Nana Akufo-Addo recklessly did. He will review the e-levy because he thinks it's not well thought through.
He will make national service optional, even though President Akufo-Addo just launched a 10-year policy implementation for them. Okay.
I feel sorry for him. I mean, is that Nana Akufo-Addo's reward from Dr. Mahmoud? But then it tells you about the character of Dr. Mahmoud. It tells you how opportunistic he can be. And it is not about principles at all. He can sacrifice anyone, anybody, and anything just so that he can be president. That's what it tells you. And so I really, really, even though I don't have sympathies for Nana Akufo-Addo, feel sorry for him in this state. And mind you, he's still even president as this is happening. Can you imagine what is likely to happen? God forbid.
Isn't it merely a game of politics where, because you yourself say Bawumia is the anointed leader of the party, they have to make him look like he's going to do things differently from what the president is doing?
I'm saying that President Nana Akufo-Addo did not have a very beautiful relationship with President Kufuor and did not agree with President Kufuor on every policy. But not once did he, how do the Chu people say it? Yinoma.
You and I, we don't speak good Chi. Let's just, yeah.
Not once did he, disown him publicly and ridicule him the way Dr. Mahmoud is ridiculing him. And that's why I feel sorry for him. That's why I think that Nana Akufo-Addo should be worried about his post-presidency with Dr. Mahmoud leading the New Patriotic Party. God forbid, I don't see him leading Ghana. But with that character, Nana Akufo-Addo should be worried that even as he is president, the man that he picked from nowhere against his own party's opposition and made somebody, is disowning him and questioning his thinking capacities in the manner that he is doing. So I feel very, very sorry. But as for the subject of Galamsey, look, it's yet again another example of the abysmal and legendary, mismanagement that has brought this country into its knees. I mean, again, the fight started with a lot of goodwill from the people of Ghana. The media sacrificed airtime, put their reporters in risk-harm way, bent fuel, their resources, because they thought the president meant it when he said he was willing to put his presidency on the line. The civil society organizations held workshops with their own funds to promote this fight, only for us to have evidence from within that this was all a scheme because party here sika. Remember that infamous recording of the Minister of Environment at the time, Professor Frimpong Boateng, where it was clearly stated in that tape that this whole charade of a fight was intended to make party some money. And look at the kingpins in the Galamsey business. If it's not a woman organizer, it is a regional chairman, and you have the president himself. Even before investigations are conducted, investigations directed, maybe pretentiously, by his Minister of Lands and Forestry into a mining firm's conduct in a forest reserve. What's the name of the company? Wintumi's company, something.
We need to wrap up.
Even with that, the president comes out to defend that mining company.
Right.
So clearly, I am sad that we have had to endure these 70 years of legendary mismanagement of our country because we experimented with, a group of people who didn't have any business seeking our mandate.
Okay. Let's turn our attention to the NDC, your party. You're unveiling Professor Gina Nopokwa-Jiman as the vice president. Is that your trump card? Or what is the trump card for the NDC ahead of election 2024?
Our trump card is our level of honesty. That is also manifested in the leader that we have. Our trump card is our level of humility. That again is manifested in the leader that we have. Our trump card is our consistency in prioritizing the most important things in the development of this country. That is manifested in our track record under President Rawlings, under President Mills, under President Mahama.
Okay.
Our trump card is in our People's Manifesto that we didn't get the opportunity to implement, which we have fine-tuned and will be launching very soon. And in lead will be the 24-hour economy.
Okay.
Because of the mess, the level of mess that this country has been, taken through in the last 7 years, we can no longer do things as usual. And that is why it is important that we all brace ourselves up to work 24 hours to bring back this country on the track of growth.
Right.
And yes, Professor Nana Jane Opoku-Agyemang is an amazing choice.
Okay.
That represents a break from what we have experienced over the years in this country, where the presidency has mostly been occupied by men. It's something you can't wish away. It's a break. It's a refreshing break. And if you look at our population, I think it is time that we have that fair balance at the presidency. And she's not just representing that feminine side of our nation, but she actually comes on board with resolve, with competence, with, you know, a track record of achievements, the first female, you know, vice chancellor this country has ever recorded.
All right.
Apart from that, look, in the times that it was even very difficult to practice media in Ghana, as the history suggested, she was already, you know, a trailblazer in the media industry, a woman. She was hosting the most powerful morning show at the time on Radio Gold, and on record was the one to have interviewed ever in a studio, one-on-one, the dreaded President Rawlings.
We have to go.
She's been a trailblazer.
My final question to you
from his days as a young lady till now, and has set so many records. One who left the Ministry of Education transformed and without any blemish.
On a scale of 1 to 10, last question, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate minority leadership 2 years after taking over from Haruna Idrisu? Amazing
continuance of you know, advocacy and, if you like, rule that is expected of a minority. I think it's been amazing. They have continued with that tradition of holding this government to account in a very, very positive light. All right. Thank you so much. Alhaji Saibu Suhuyini, MP for Tamale North. It was a pleasure. My pleasure too, sweetie. Thank you. Well, that's not all, but I hope you enjoyed that conversation. There's still more to come. We're going to talk about the free SHS story as the Minister for Education has been telling it, and we will probe to see what are the facts. Stay with me. We'll be right back.